Okay, so the book review today is about a book called The Bible Says So, What We Get Right and Wrong About Scripture's Most Controversial Issues. All right, let's see it. Okay, I know that's not my thing, but I say it in honor of Dr. Dan McClellan, who is the author of this book, and I'm a huge fan of his work. So I was, really excited to see what he had to say here. I will say right off the bat, the book I would give it a 9 out of 10, and that's only because it's really more of a grab bag of topics. So each chapter is a standalone subject, and I think in a great book, I appreciate just having one topic that you can learn a lot more about. Each of these topics in these chapters, obviously, there could be whole books written on them. And I do believe that Dan McClellan is perfectly capable of delving deeply into the scholarship of each of these subjects. I think the intention of this book and each of these chapters was just to kind of be as much of a cursory description of what's going on with these issues in the Bible as possible, and to just give people an idea generally, or at least sufficiently, of what the Bible says about each of these things. Now, if you wanted to say that the book had sort of one overarching idea, it would be what Dan McClellan does, which is kind of combating misinformation, specifically as it pertains to the Bible. So he's a biblical scholar, and what he does is essentially clarify what a lot of people think about the Bible. Because when it comes to some things, maybe we have these ideas that are a little bit wrong, maybe by a nuance, but when it comes to other things, they're just like major errors that we have when it comes to what people by and large think about it. And so he talks about a variety of these controversial issues to sort of give a clarification from what we know in biblical scholarship and what kind of the general consensus is amongst biblical scholars. And so this is, of course, very helpful, and this is why I would recommend this book to anybody. He does a good job of trying to summarize each of these points. Some of the things he talks about include the issue of homosexuality in the Bible, creation, the matter of Jesus being God, and other things like this. I would say the most important topics and chapters are probably the ones that are most controversial and most discussed amongst our culture, would be the matter of the homosexuality issue and hell. So he talks about hell, and I think it's the last chapter, and kind of how our ideas about hell really don't reflect the biblical notions of hell. But anyways, these two topics I've investigated a lot, and so what he was saying here wasn't entirely new to me. Some of the things he said in some of the other chapters were definitely new. There's a lot of scholarship here, and so it would require a little bit more investigating to be able to digest all of it. But that's why I really appreciate it. In terms of my personal reflection on the chapters, what I've been trying to engage a little bit more recently is the abortion issue, and so he talks about this as well in the book. And just to give kind of a cursory idea of what he says about this, he talks about how most of the passages that are used to discuss abortion really aren't helpful when you investigate what they're all about. And there's probably only one passage that gives us any sense of what's going on in the abortion discussion, and that's specifically in Exodus chapter 21. I think it's verses 22 to 25. And basically what's going on in this passage, very briefly, is the law that's given doesn't really equate the life of a fetus to the life of an adult woman. So that's kind of the ancient take, essentially, is these two beings are not equal. And he also talks a little bit about some of the ancient theologies, some of the ancient philosophical views on when life begins. And it was interesting for me to learn that there are a spectrum of views that kind of match our spectrum of views now. Some philosophers believe that life began at conception. Some believe it wasn't until the first breath of the born baby. And others, and this is apparently the prevailing idea from Aristotle on, was the idea that life begins at the, quote, quickening. And essentially, this is when the mother can start to tell when the baby is active and kicking, and you can kind of tell that there's life in there, right? So in any case, there's a lot more to this, but that was just a very helpful part of the discussion. But anyway, overall, again, this is really a text that tries to clarify what the Bible actually does and what the Bible is actually saying about a variety of topics. And I would say it's very helpful for anybody, because even people that have been reading the Bible for a long time tend to have strange ideas that don't necessarily reflect what the Bible says. This happens often because, I think that early on, for a lot of people, early on in their experience with reading the Bible, they kind of get these ideas from outside of it, maybe something that other people say about it, and you kind of read that into the text and run with it, and then you never change your perspective on what the Bible says. But I think what biblical scholars do is they read the Bible very carefully, and obviously they have a lot of other tools that they use, in terms of working with archaeology and history and ancient languages and things like this. So it's very, very helpful to get this sort of perspective for all of these issues. So there you go. Definitely would recommend this. Really appreciate Dr. McClellan's work, and there you go. It's a great book.